There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Yesterday, I was driving through the parking lot at Boise State for a small sporting event. And I was with my wife and one of my kids. I couldn't remember which kid. Someone said, "Is that the state of having 4 kids?" And I was like, pretty much. And I don't remember what happened. It doesn't really matter what happened. Someone cut us off. Someone was doing something. It could have been any one of a million things that have happened in the last week alone. And Caroline said, "Does nobody care about anyone else anymore?" Have you found yourself saying that? Somewhere? Some when, or all the whens and all the wheres? Where you just look out and it feels like we're all so in pain, we have no ability to care about anyone else. I sat and watched a pedestrian light. It's the one in front of St. Luke's. It's not subtle. Yellow, bright yellow flashing lights when a pedestrian hits the button. I sat there and watched 4 cars accelerate through the crosswalk when that thing went off, and thought, we just want to hit somebody. When we were in First Light, it was pointed out by Alan that the psalmist in 79, also not in a really great place, by the way, if you didn't notice, the psalmist says something like, "God save us because it looks bad if you don't." And I pointed out that even psalmists, after whom we say this is the word of the Lord, still pray the same prayers college students that didn't study for a final pray. God, would you just help me out here and then I'll do something good for you? I mean, we are all a little bit, when we are beset by the times, manipulative. We are all a little bit like the psalmist earlier in that passage saying, "Hey, could you visit some of this pain and agony on someone else?" In much the way, mind you, because I think it can sound terrible, in much the way you might when a tornado is bearing down on you or a hurricane is bearing down on you at a much slower pace, which isn't easier. It's emotionally even more difficult. We lived that journey for a little while. You might say, "Can you make it not hit me?" Which, in a different moment, we would realize is we're praying that the tornado hit the town north of us or south of us. But we're just in a place where we've had all that we can handle. And we don't want any more. And so we can become hardened to the fact that everyone else is in the same place. I love that phrase. We associate it a lot with Pharaoh, but it gets used so often in the Old Testament. Hardened hearts, right? You can know who's been out working in the fields a lot because their skin is calloused, right? Or in Meredith's case, the bars on gymnastics. We have a lot of vitamin E to pour over all the rips. And eventually your hands harden. And it does it intentionally. It's a part of our biology to harden this surface so that we feel less pain from the continual abuse of the shovel or the spade or the bar as you go round and round. And in many ways, the hardening of your calluses is a good thing. But our hearts can harden in the same way when we've taken in more than we can and we shut ourselves down to the pain of our neighbors because we are overwhelmed with our own pain. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. A significant issue at bay in Jeremiah's world is ambiguity, right? In what is good? Is there good? What is the answer? Is there an answer? We might talk about Jeremiah's text. This particular text is having all manner of rhetorical questions, right? And you know what a rhetorical question is, right? Thank you. It's a device. It's supposed to have an answer that's apparent to everyone, so nobody needs to answer. I had a professor once who was talking, and he said he was asked to preach in an African American church, and he kept asking rhetorical questions, and they kept answering them. They said, in our church, don't ask a question unless you want an answer. But Presbyterians are really good at staying silent in the midst of rhetorical questions. And you'll hear and you'll read that Jeremiah is asking all sorts of rhetorical questions. Is there a God? Is God here? Is there balm? Is there healing? We might want to know that for the people of the Old Testament, the question, is there a balm in Gilead, is yes. It's a very common snake oil that they used to sell on carts all over the place. But Gilead is known for their healing balms, right? So too, when Jeremiah says, is there a balm in Gilead, they would say, yes. But then it's that yes that makes the next questions so provocative. If there is, why are my people not whole? To which I imagine the prophet Jeremiah or God is saying, we're seeking healing from the wrong sources for the wrong ailments. Something the hymn gets when it says, the sin-sick soul. There is much around us, I don't think you're going to debate me on this, that is broken right now. Whether it's, and I'll keep preaching about this till the cows come home or you still stop paying me to do so. Whether we're talking about supply chains, whether we're talking about the fact, here's a great innocuous, trivial example. We ordered new windows for this area like 6 months ago. You can go look at them, they're the wrong windows. It took 3 months to get the parts in. It took another month to get workers who could actually show up, and then they installed the wrong windows. And when told they were installing the wrong windows, they said, okay, but we're just going to install them anyway. And if after you're done, you decide you still don't like them, we'll come back and pull them out and put in new ones. We're that kind of broken right now, y'all. And I don't blame them. They just had a job to do. And I think almost like Stockholm Syndrome, they're thinking maybe they'll just decide to love them. But probably not. Mostly because there was supposed to be one opaque window for the bathroom, and every single one of them is. And Ryan would like to be able to see out his office windows. It's a small, trivial example, but you've been there, right? Everything feels that way right now. Right? And we don't know how to fix it. I've actually thought it'd be great if we could just put the world on a 6-month sabbatical. But we wouldn't even know how to do that, would we? The summer has ended, the harvest have come, and we are not saved. At which point it's important to remember that in biblical terms, particularly in the Old Testament, we need to strip the idea that salvation is about heaven and hell, and remember it's about being healed of that which plagues us. We are plagued by the feeling of being plagued. Our issue is spiritual and emotional, and there isn't a balm for that. And so when Jeremiah says, is there a balm in Gilead, I think it's less rhetorical question and more an open question. You know the difference between an open and closed question? A closed question is a question I ask, and you're supposed to give the one and only answer I'm looking for you to give. Closed questions usually are like the student who wants to prove to the teacher that they're smarter than the teacher, so they ask a question that's not a question. You have that person in class, right? They're usually sitting in the front row, and their hands raised really tall. Right? But an open question is a question we ask into the world, and we don't know what the answer is, right? So a rhetorical question is always a closed question. We already assume everyone agrees, right? But what happens when we ask a rhetorical question and we suddenly find the answer isn't sufficient? It's far more open than we thought. Is there a balm in Gilead? Because if the answer is yes, then we should be healed, but we're not. So that calls into question, I think Jeremiah knows well, that calls into question that there isn't. Or at least the one we all are thinking of isn't going to do us any good in this instance. I regularly like to say that I struggle at times with the spiritualizing of the Bible because the Bible has many fewer scientific answers, and so all of the questions have spiritual answers. But we're guilty of the opposite so often. We have so many scientific answers, we offer very few spiritual ones. It's a hard thing to sit in the middle and say we need a healthy dose of both. Where is our balm for what's plaguing us? Where is and where are we experiencing God in our world right now? What will soften our hearts to each other? I was talking at First Light, And one of the people that had a thought, his wife works at the hospital, and it suddenly dawned on me that when we work at a hospital, we talk about the Hippocratic Oath, and you have to treat everybody. But it's kind of interesting when we come to the church that we really only treat the people who theologically agree with us, right? Or when I find myself in coalition work in the neighborhood or advocacy on issues, we all have to decide to only work on a single issue, because the second we try to work on two, we won't want to work together anymore, right? That sense of division, that sense of we aren't in this together. And so we find ourselves spinning around in smaller and smaller groups, addressing less and less of what ails us. And certainly not in any way that imagines there might be connections between the issues. How do we soften our hearts to the world while our own heart is hurting? There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Somehow we're just going to have to decide to pick up hope, to create not smaller and smaller communities, but larger and larger circles of balm, in which we're going to have to remember that I don't know where the guy that cut me off is going. And even so, it's a symptom of his pain and his hurt. And I can treat that no matter whether I like him or not. We can treat that whether we like each other or not. There's a balm in Gilead becomes at once an open question and the attestation of faith and hope. And how provocative that is if it's God that's asking the question. Here I am, right in the middle of it all, asking us, is there a balm? Is there healing here? And I'd like to hope collectively our answer is yes, we'll make it so. Amen.